In the small, forgotten town of Ravensbrook, a sinister legend whispered through the generations. The tale of the Man of Midnight. A figure of pure malevolence, he was said to emerge from the shadows when the clock struck 12, bringing death and despair to those unfortunate enough to encounter him. Ravensbrook was nestled deep within a dense, ancient forest. The trees loomed tall and twisted, their gnarled branches like skeletal fingers grasping at the sky. The town itself was a cluster of decaying buildings, their facades weathered and cracked, as if the very life had been sucked out of them. A thick, unnatural mist clung to the cobblestone streets, swirling around the feet of the few brave souls who dared to venture out after dark. Amidst this eerie setting lived the protagonist, Emily Thorne, a young woman in her late 20s with a sharp mind and a penchant for uncovering the truth. She had returned to Ravensbrook to settle her late grandmother's affairs, a task she believed would be straightforward. Little did she know, her return would awaken the horrors that had lain dormant for years. Emily's grandmother, Agnes, had been the town historian, a role that came with its own set of secrets and dangers. Agnes had spent her life collecting stories and artifacts related to the town's dark past, and among her possessions, Emily found an old, leather-bound journal. The journal detailed encounters with the Man of Midnight, each account more terrifying than the last. It spoke of a tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a sinister grin, a being that seemed to absorb the very light around him, leaving only darkness in his wake. Intrigued and horrified, Emily began to delve deeper into the journal's entries. The more she read, the more she felt a growing sense of dread. The accounts spoke of people disappearing without a trace, their homes left in disarray, blood splattered across walls and floors. Those who survived encounters with the Man of Midnight were left broken, their minds shattered by the horrors they had witnessed. One night, as the clock approached midnight, Emily found herself unable to sleep. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of her grandmother's old house. The journal lay open on the desk beside her, its pages illuminated by the flickering candlelight. She felt a chill run down her spine, as if the very air around her had grown colder. Suddenly, the old grandfather clock in the hallway began to chime. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she counted the strikes 10, 11, 12. With the final chime, a deafening silence fell over the house. The candle flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. Emily's breath came in shallow gasps as she strained to hear any sound. The silence was oppressive, suffocating. Then, from the corner of the room, she heard a faint whisper, a sound like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Her eyes darted to the source, and she saw him. The Man of Midnight stood there, his form barely discernible in the shadows. His hollow eyes bore into her, and a sinister grin spread across his face. He stepped forward, and the darkness seemed to follow him, swallowing the room in its inky blackness. Emily's scream caught in her throat as she backed away, but there was nowhere to run. The Man of Midnight raised a skeletal hand, and Emily felt an icy grip tighten around her heart. She could feel the life draining out of her, her vision growing dim. In a final, desperate act, she reached for the journal, clutching it to her chest as if it could somehow protect her. And then, just as suddenly as he had appeared, the Man of Midnight was gone. The darkness receded, and the candle flickered back to life. Emily collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, her body trembling with fear. The journal lay open beside her, its pages stained with drops of blood. Emily knew that the legend was real, and that she had only just begun to uncover the true horror that haunted Ravensbrook. The Man of Midnight was out there, waiting for his next victim, and she was determined to stop him, if she could survive the night. The following day, Emily awoke to a weak sun filtering through the grime-streaked windows. The events of the previous night felt like a nightmare, yet the journal beside her and the bruises on her chest were stark reminders of the chilling reality. Determined to uncover more, she spent the day gathering supplies and exploring the hidden corners of her grandmother's house, searching for clues. In the attic, amidst cobwebs and forgotten relics, Emily discovered a dusty trunk. Inside were old photographs, letters, and a rusted key. One photograph caught her eye, a group of townspeople standing in front of the church, their faces grim. In the background, barely visible, was the silhouette of a man, his hollow eyes piercing through the years. As night fell, Emily prepared herself. She lit candles around the house, creating a circle of light in the living room, and armed herself with a flashlight and a kitchen knife. Her heart pounded as the grandfather clock began its ominous countdown to midnight.
10, 11, 12.
Silence. Emily strained her ears, listening for the faintest sound. The air grew colder, and a whispering wind rustled through the house. She saw a shadow move in the corner of her eye. The man of midnight had returned. He materialized in the center of the room, his form more distinct than before. His grin widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp and too many. Emily gripped the knife, her hands shaking. She remembered the journal's warnings. The man of midnight thrived on fear. Gathering her courage, she stepped forward. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice wavering but defiant. The man of midnight tilted his head, his eyes reflecting a void of nothingness. "I seek what was promised," he hissed, his voice a chilling echo. "Your grandmother," she owed a debt. Emily's mind raced. The journal had mentioned something about a pact, a deal made long ago. Desperate to stall for time, she asked, "What kind of debt?" "A soul for a soul," he replied, his voice dripping with malice. "She promised me her life, and now I come to collect." Emily's heart sank. She realized that her grandmother had made a bargain to protect the town, sacrificing herself to keep the man of midnight at bay. But with Agnes gone, the debt had fallen to her. Before she could react, the man of midnight lunged. Emily dodged, slashing wildly with the knife. The blade passed through him, meeting no resistance. His laughter filled the room, a sound that seemed to come from all directions at once. In a desperate move, Emily grabbed the journal and began to read aloud from the last entry, hoping to find a way to banish him. As she spoke, the candles flickered and the shadows seemed to writhe in agony. The man of midnight roared in fury, his form flickering like a disrupted signal. "You cannot stop me," he bellowed, lunging again. Emily screamed as his cold, skeletal hands wrapped around her throat. Her vision darkened, and she felt herself slipping away. But as her last breath escaped, the candles flared brightly, and a blinding light filled the room. When she awoke, the man of midnight was gone. The journal lay open beside her, the final entry glowing with an ethereal light. Emily realized that her grandmother had hidden a secret spell within the pages, a last-ditch effort to protect her. Exhausted but alive, Emily knew that the battle was far from over. The man of midnight had been banished, but not destroyed. He would return, hungrier and more vengeful than ever. And when he did, she would be ready. Over the following weeks, Emily immersed herself in her grandmother's journals and the town's history. She learned of the pact Agnes had made to save Ravensbrook from a curse that threatened to destroy it. The man of midnight was a manifestation of that curse, a malevolent entity bound by dark magic. Agnes had delayed his wrath, but now the burden fell upon Emily to end it once and for all. Emily sought out the oldest resident of Ravensbrook, an elderly woman named Matilda, who was rumored to have knowledge of the town's darkest secrets. Matilda lived in a decrepit house on the outskirts of the forest, surrounded by talismans and charms meant to ward off evil. "You've seen him, haven't you?" Matilda rasped when Emily arrived, her eyes sharp despite her age. Emily nodded, recounting her encounters with the man of midnight. Matilda listened intently, her expression grave. "There is a way to end this," Matilda said finally. "A ritual, dangerous and demanding. It requires the blood of the cursed, the bones of the damned, and the fire of the innocent." Emily's heart sank at the ominous requirements, but she steeled herself. "Tell me what I need to do." Over the next few days, Emily gathered the necessary components. She ventured into the forest to find the bones of those who had vanished over the years, now mere remnants scattered among the roots and underbrush. She obtained her own blood, symbolizing the cursed lineage passed down from her grandmother. The fire of the innocent would come from a white candle, blessed by Matilda in a rare and ancient rite. On the night of the ritual, Emily stood in the town's abandoned church, a place once sacred but now tainted by years of neglect and sorrow. The air was thick with tension, the silence oppressive. She placed the bones in a circle, dripped her blood over them, and lit the candle in the center. As the clock struck midnight, the man of midnight appeared, his form more menacing than ever. His eyes glowed with an unholy fire, and his grin was wider, more sinister. Emily's heart pounded, but she stood her ground. "This ends tonight," she declared, her voice echoing through the empty church. The man of midnight laughed, a sound that reverberated off the walls. "You cannot stop me," he hissed. "You are but a mortal, bound by flesh and fear." Emily began to chant the words Matilda had taught her, her voice growing stronger with each syllable. The air crackled with energy, and the candle's flame burned brighter. The man of midnight recoiled, his form flickering as if struggling to maintain its shape. The ground beneath them trembled, and a howling wind tore through the church, extinguishing all light except the candle's flame. Emily continued the chant, her voice unwavering. The bones glowed with an eerie light, and the blood seemed to boil, creating a swirling vortex of energy. With a final, guttural scream, the man of midnight lunged at Emily. She held her ground, the chant reaching its climax. The vortex expanded, enveloping him in a blinding light. He howled in agony, his form disintegrating piece by piece. As the last words of the chant left her lips, the man of midnight exploded in a burst of darkness, his essence sucked into the vortex. The light faded, and the church was plunged into silence once more. Emily collapsed to the floor, exhausted but victorious. The man of midnight was gone, his curse lifted from Ravensbrook. The town, though still scarred by its dark history, was free at last. In the days that followed, the mist that had shrouded the town began to dissipate, and the sun shone brighter. Ravensbrook started to rebuild, its residents no longer living in fear. Emily, though haunted by the memories, found solace in knowing she had fulfilled her grandmother's legacy and saved the town from an unspeakable evil. And so, the tale of the man of midnight came to an end, leaving Ravensbrook with the hope of a brighter future. But the shadows of the past lingered, a reminder that some horrors, though banished, are never truly gone.